aviation cadets. A short while ago, they too were average American boys.
A statistic. The United States military is still probably, Walmart notwithstanding, the company that recruits the most broadly in the United States. 35% of 18-year-olds are either medically unfit or obese. The next 40% get eliminated because they do so poorly on the tests, on the aptitude tests. So something like 80% of American kids of 18-year-old men and women are either physically or mentally not prepared to be a soldier.
We tend to have a morbid fascination with the level of dysfunction in the US. And yet nothing, I mean, I'm kind of repeating, nothing happens. And I'm really curious about what the tipping point is that will actually make something happen.
Given a family of 4 in the United States today, what does it cost to, quote, quote, live the American dream? Which means you have to own your own house, you have to own your own cars, you and the bank have to own all that. That's a different point. The little problem is that median income has stagnated for a long time, more or less at $51,000. So the fact of the matter is, we're still California dreaming. We're still dreaming about what it is to be America. And if you watch some of our TV shows, in fact, the retro TV shows have gone back to being a couple kids, a couple cars, living like Ozzie and Harriet did in the 50s, partly because almost no one can afford it anymore. Today, something like 70% of American kids coming out of college have an average of $35,000 in debt.
I'm very thankful for the charts which you showed, which are a very nice way to boil down what we know. There is Stiglitz, The Price of Inequality, there is George Pecker. I can only repeat the article which is out in the American Journal of Political Science, Democracy, This Was a Nice Experiment. What they did is they took data from 20 years of legislation in Congress and they checked who brought in the legislation proposal, big data, big business or NGOs, and which turned into legislation. If you do that strata thing, you get that every proposal from big data and big business turned into legislation, and any other proposal from NGOs, aggregated public will, blah, 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 did not turn into legislation. So democracy, this was a nice experiment. And here's the thing, how can we cope with this? Because do we have any decent tools as, say, citizens to turn this around?
The way that our politics, our education systems, our infrastructures are functioning, honestly, they seem to be bought and paid for. So I have a hard time looking to that process now and hoping that they become actually representative voices of the people, because the Koch brothers are buying the Republican ticket. So what is politics? Is politics an arm that becomes a wrist that signs into policy that which big business needs?
I can show you the numbers in Alice and say people ought to be really pissed off. There is no anger in the United States. If you're sitting there looking at polls working for candidates, you can't find something to grab onto that makes any sense given what, from an analytic point of view, you'd say, a Republican running for president, you've got to be kidding. At the moment, if I'm a betting man, I'm betting the next president of the United States is a Republican.
You know, the anger is among blacks, right? The blacks are angry. And we know that, and we saw that in Baltimore. We've got places like Detroit, which are bankrupt, right? And where this values of individualism don't hold because kids were shot on a playground and yet nobody's talking, right? So I think there's a sort of a big breakdown, but it's not clear to me that it's in the Democratic or the Republican Party's sort of establishment's interest to be mobilizing on it at the moment. So that's how I would think about that issue.
It may not be anger because people are beyond anger. It's something worse than anger. People may want to change something, despair, and that's exactly right. And where I really agree with Alan is when our economy tanks again, it's going to be just awful. I mean, it's astounding. People are mentioning Baltimore. The former mayor of Baltimore has the temerity to run for president of the United States. You know, does he want to do to America what he did to Baltimore? I mean, it's crazy. There's something that's absolutely broken and dysfunctional, but it's one of these. It's hard to be empirical about it. It's hard to put your finger on precisely what it is, but it's a different country. We lived in the golden age. I mean, I absolutely believe in the fall of empires, and I'm a very, patriotic American guy, but we're, it may be over. It may be over.
The next recession changes the United States of America, I think. We are now, since the cushion is gone, next time it gets really nasty. And it gets nasty really, really fast. And then I think that could begin shifting some of the politics. And my bet, which is my punchline, is that 10, 20 years from now, we don't care about the rest of the world. We're going to look inside. We've got to solve a whole series of problems that we can't get away without addressing anymore. So rebuilding America literally becomes, a la the 40s and 50s, our future. Now, the real question, which I'll stop now, is can we do that in the world as it now exists? Can we literally say, guys, it's been a great 50 years, 75 years. My own gut instinct about the politicians I know is that they want to do that. And that's where the votes are, it's where the opportunities are for them, and I think that's our future.